There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books, and this is another episode of Zooming In, which is an occasional series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over about bookish articles about the reading lifestyle and whatnot. And oh my God, talk about luminaries times three. Today I'm joined by Chris of the fabulous book podcast, The Readers, and James of what did I say? The Readers? Did I say the Readers? Yes, I did. Oh, God. I've never done that. Jesus.
I was like,
all good.
that is not what that's called. Yeah.
That is not what
And I
that's
can't really imitate, either of those guys very well. So.
God, I make a lot of mistakes, but I've never made that one before. Of the fabulous book podcast, The Book Cougars, and James, who's plastic cover critic on Twitter.
I'm on the book readers, yeah.
Are you going to do a blooper reel with this? You got to do a blooper reel.
I think the whole damn thing is going to be a blooper reel. So I'm not even going to attempt the name of.
Yeah, the worst to last.
Yeah,
I want to have James's novel in front of me, but so what? Tell me the title of your novel again, James.
Gibbons.
Gibbons. Thank you. All right.
You don't have it on your desk all the time.
Yeah,
you don't
not
sleep
yet.
with it under your pillow.
It's in a little lucite block.
It's rather personal to ask me where I keep it on my person.
Hey, my first edition of that is my retirement plan. So.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books, and this is another episode of Zooming In, which is an occasional series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over about bookish articles about the reading lifestyle and whatnot. And oh my God, talk about luminaries times three. Today I'm joined by Chris of the fabulous book podcast, The Book Cougars, and James of the notorious Twitter account Caustic Cover Critic, and author of last year, his debut work of fiction, Gibbons, which was cyber launched between Dorian and I on the internet. And then Dorian Stuber, who is co-host of a fabulous bookish podcast as well. And it's called One Bright Book. And he has an incredible book blog. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name, and maybe he'll be good enough to say it, but all of this stuff will be linked in the show notes. And we are here to talk about a literary topic near and dear to our hearts. And it's probably good that we're all on Zoom so that no fisticuffs will be involved in this conversation. This is about bailing or DNFing. And we're bouncing our discussion off a couple articles about the topic. Both of them are from The Atlantic. The first one, which is anti-DNFing, is from 2014, and it's called Finish That Book by Juliet Lapidos. And the other one, which is cautiously pro-bailing, just came out a couple of weeks ago in The Atlantic. When is it okay to not finish a book? By Sophie Verthbau, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So, bailing. Let's just go around the horn here and just talk about you and bailing for a minute or two, and then we'll dive in. So, are you a bailer? What's your opinion on bailing? How often do you bail? But just kind of introduce yourself by way of your bailing habits. Chris.
Oh, me first. I'm not opposed to bailing at all or DNFing. I do think that there are so many books and so little time, as they say. But I do also think a lot of it depends on how you choose the books and your intention for picking up a book. So I liked some of the things that both of these authors had to say.
Good. And James.
Similarly, I used to be a steely, obsessed, must finish this book person. And then I realized there was no real reason that I was doing that other than self-harm at that point. So now, I just have again, as Chris said, sometimes there's this particular reason you're reading a book. There's a reason you've picked it up, and it may or may not be meeting that reason, which is not the book's fault. It's what you were looking for. And books like that, I'll I'll come back to another time. But now I've basically, the 50-page thing, if it's just not working for me, round about 50 pages, usually that's when I'll jettison it.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Dorian.
I think I'm a lot like James, in every way I try to be like James. When I was a kid, I had a book called The Smartest Bear in the World and His Brother Oliver. It's by Alice Bach, and I've tried to find this book a few times and not been super successful with it. And I learned a little bit about Alice Bach. It turned out she was like a kind of well-known religious scholar and academic for a long time. But anyway, this book is not religious at all. It's about it's about a bear family, and Ronald is the main character, and he is going to read the encyclopedia from A to Z in order, and he's not going to hibernate with the rest of his family so that he can stay up all winter long, and he will be the smartest bear in the world when he gets up, unlike his brother Oliver, who only likes food and has no culturally redeeming qualities whatsoever as far as Ronald is concerned. But I mean, you can kind of guess how it goes, eh? This book had such a hold. It has wonderful illustrations too. The book had such a hold on me, and I think I don't know if I imbibed that. I too was like going to read. Part of me still believes I will read every book. It must read every book. But I really used to be hardcore about, if I started this thing, I have to finish it. And that's a terrible, terrible way to live, I think. I really do. I think that is like, I have aged, if not matured. I've become a lot more okay with not finishing things. I still sometimes feel a little bit guilty that I haven't quite got rid of that residual thing of this must happen, but I think I have learned to actually enjoy reading more than I did, even though I would have always said that I enjoyed it very much. But there was this kind of thing compelling me that I had to finish the thing, and I'm just not that way anymore. So.
Right. Well, this is not going to be as contentious of a discussion as I was worried or hoping that it might be.
Sorry, Sean. Yeah.
You people, you modulated your ideologies in this respect. So I am the extremist bailer on this panel, but I'm actually kind of settling down as I age too. But I came back to reading after spending 20 or 30 years where I read a book a month at the most. And then for various personal reasons, got back into reading in a really big way, in a really extreme way. And I didn't know what kind of books I was into anymore. So I sampled widely various genres and various kinds of books and didn't like most of them. And so I bailed on them. So during those years where I was doing a lot of experimental reading, I would sometimes bail on a book on page 1, often by page 20, but certainly by page 50. Sometimes 90% of the way through the book, I would get disgusted with it and bail. So sometimes I had as many bails in a year almost as books that I did finish. My reading life is not that extreme now, but I named myself the Queen of Bailing at one point, and then I got so good at it that I promoted myself to the Empress of Bailing, and I still hold that title. But this year I've maybe bailed on a dozen books, something like that, which is a fraction of what I have in
you're
years.
softening. My goodness. Yeah.
And it is partly what some of you have already commented on, that you choose your books more wisely or you do more research or whatever. And I have realized that I'm just not into a lot of kinds of books that don't even bother trying them. And so, yeah, I just don't bail the way I used to, but I'm still a big fan of it. Chris.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking I used to finish every book I started as well. And I think that's just training from school. We're all told finish that book and we do that and it's just kind of habitual. And I think I did feel a little guilty and I felt like I wasn't intellectual enough if I didn't finish a book, that it was some kind of weakness. I believe one of the authors calls it lazy not to finish a book, which I would never go to that extreme. But what I'm thinking is that both of these writers, I believe, were in their 30s when they wrote these essays. I tried to track them down a little bit because
I'm glad you did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think like when you hit your 30s, a lot of people start creating or developing, or they've developed already their own philosophy of what they're reading and why they're reading it. So bailing, I think, is part of that for a lot of people. Or they're just really very particular what they pick up in the first place, which is the sense that I got with the Lapidos. I think she's very particular about books she chooses to read, you know, whereas the other article, Vershbau, I got the sense that she's talking more about, when you randomly pick up books and not maybe thinking through all that carefully about what you are picking up to read. So my point being that I think it is kind of an age-related topic in some ways.
I think you're right.
Because I think you do want to encourage younger people to challenge themselves to finish books, depending on what they are. I mean, I like to challenge myself too with hard classics or what have you.
Do you ever? My God.
I could never abandon a book 90% of the way through, though. I gotta say, Sean, like, wow, that's like that's insane to me. I have to tell you, like, I'm like,
yeah, even if I'm hating it at that point, the sunk cost fallacy, I'm in there. I can't.
Seriously, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I just got so disgusted with it. It was commercial fiction, and it was just this really kind of LA story about single women or divorced women or something, and it just got so gross near the end that I just said, I'm not finishing it. So
yeah, wow.
One thing I've noticed about myself is I have trouble sleeping, so I listen to audiobooks at night as well as reading paper books. But I am more likely to continue a book if I was reading it physically, I absolutely would have abandoned it, but I'm much more likely to keep listening to it, partly because if nothing else, you can go to sleep because you're bored out of your fucking mind listening to this thing. But yeah, so I will. The manner of imbibing it does make a difference, I think, as well. If I'm actually reading a book, I want it to be a good book. But yeah, if I'm just trying to get to sleep.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this is maybe taking us afield, but I do think that an audiobook can paper over some serious weaknesses in a book. Like there are some books that I listen to and I'm enjoying them because of the reader or etc. And I wouldn't keep up with them.
Yeah, like a charismatic actor in a shit film, you can keep watching. A charismatic reader for a fairly dud book, you can keep going.
Yeah.
And then there's the reverse situation where I have bailed on many an audiobook because I didn't like the audio narration.
Yeah.
Or I thought it was going to be okay, and then get that 5-minute preview, but it's just not enough. I need an hour preview to decide whether, like, if the audio narrator doesn't enhance it in some way, it's not. I don't want to do it on audio. But I don't. To my credit, I think I don't actually abandon the book. I will just get the textual copy and carry on. Yeah.
What about books where you thought seriously about giving up a book and then you didn't for whatever reason? You kind of kept persevering, and then you were like, oh, this is kind of amazing, actually. Like that's happened to me sometimes. Do you worry about that, Sean? You're just like,
I don't. I have had that experience, but it has not made me change my mind about bailing. I wish I could remember what the book was. It's in the last year that there was a book. Well, there's a couple times where I have bailed prematurely and friends have coaxed me to give it another try or to pick it back up again. And I haven't regretted that. And sometimes it was because I needed to get the audiobook to hear the author reading it to me, and that made I could get into it that way, whereas textually I couldn't. Like there's all kinds of things. And so I am open to when people try to convince me to go back to a book.
The summer book.
No, not the summer book. Well,
Buddy, read it with me.
I'm just putting in a little something for all the other people who are listening to this who don't know what we're talking about. Sean has revealed to us before recording that he did not finish Tove Jansson's The Summer Book, which all right-thinking people know is one of the great books of the 20th century. So you can edit that out, Sean. I just want I want the people to know.
I want to leave it in. You're a coward.
I'm a what? A coward?
If you're a coward, you can edit it out.
Well, me and Ronan Hessian both, because when he said he didn't like that book either. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Ouch! That one hurts. So I'm never invited back to the show again.
One of my favorite things about bailing is that's the only context in which I actually write a very short Goodreads review. Every time I bail, I write 1 or 2 sentences about why. So here's my bail review of The Summer Book. Do you want to hear it? It's from 2016, 8 years ago. My God, almost to the day. I came to this book at least 4 decades too late. I do not have the stomach for a tale that has a magical forest. Bailed 10% of the way in.
Oh, dear.
Jesus. listen, some bad shit was going down in 2016. Maybe we'll give you a pass. But there's not even a forest. They're on that little island in the
There's
Gulf
some
of
moss.
Finland. It's like it's
Magical
it's,
moss, then.
it's a rock. There's nothing growing on it. I think you read the other summer book.
It was a little too sickly sweet for me at the time. One of the articles, I think it's the Vershbau, the one that's kind of pro bailing. She talks about a strategy for sampling. If you're worried that you spent like $40 on a hardcover that you don't want to, you feel like you should finish it. She said, well, get library books. So is that something that any of you do? I read books in the library, but it's not particularly related to bailing. I guess in a way it is easier to DNF if you haven't shelled out hard-earned money for it. Or there's things like Scribd. It's now named Everand, or like a kind of book. It's like Netflix for books. So you have unlimited access to books, so you can sample books that way. And to your Libby at the library, there's ways to do it that you're not spending a bunch of money. For me, it's just the cost of doing business, so to speak. I take my bales to the used bookstore and trade them in for stuff that I might like better.
I used to think about the money thing a lot. I mean, I used to have less money than I do now. So that's not an insignificant fact, I guess. But now I kind of think it's just my contribution to the literary world or something, you know? Like, so the author got some money and, you know, God knows no author's getting that much money. And so I worry a lot less about the money angle, although I can imagine other people in other circumstances might have to worry about a lot more. But the library is just the greatest thing ever for all reasons. And if that could just be one of them, I don't really think of it as in terms of the bailing or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'd get a lot of more books in the library if they had the particular ones I was after. But yeah, the financial side of things for bailing is fairly low. As Dorian was saying, it was, much more of a concern in the past. But then, I was also more earnest in the past and just was determined to soldier on no matter what. So, I don't know, a combination of factors. But I think, actually, one of the articles, though, the bit that particularly bugged me was, I think, in the Lapidus article, was that basically you owe it to literature to finish the book article. Which drove me out the wall, because you're kind of one step away from you owe it to literature to read every book, no matter of its quality. You must pick up and robotically read all the books, whether or not they're any good. I don't know. It bugged me a lot, I have to say.
Yeah,
Yes.
like it's a two-way street, like you don't owe anything to the author. I think the author owes more to the reader, actually, and editors as well. I think editors can be slightly responsible for the quality of books and the quality of how a story is put together. But yeah, blaming the reader, one of them calls readers lazy. I just kind of feel like you can't really blame the readers.
Yeah.
I don't think so, anyway.
I'd have to say that, without wishing to sound like I'm trying to big note myself, when I'm abandoning books, it's not usually because they're difficult. It's because they're bad, or it's because they're stylistically dull as fuck. I just, it's not laziness. It's because I literally cannot be bothered with this particular writer's way of doing things anymore. And that's not usually because they're hard. It's because they can't, they couldn't write bum on a wall in some cases. They're just not good writers.
Yes.
So
I've done that before with a book where there's a certain phrase that I hate and they'll say it. And I'm just like, okay, they say it one more time or write it one more time, I'm out. And I have dropped books for things like that, because it's just, it feels, if we're going to throw the word lazy around, it feels kind of lazy on the writer's end of it.
Yeah, lazy writers are much worse than lazy readers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned before, I can't remember who it was, but there's also the kind of like abandoning of something that's like, it's not about the quality of the book or about you or anything. It's just about the lack of fit at that particular moment. Like, I know there are things where I'm like, you know what? Another time, I'm not so tired, I'm not so overworked, or whatever the heck it happens to be. This book could totally maybe work for me, and I'm gonna give it a try, And there's others where I'm like, I just can't imagine it's working for me ever, and it's just I'm gonna, donate to the library or whatever. But it doesn't have to be moralized in the way that Lando seems to be doing, right? Like, it could be also circumstantial.
Yeah, and I kind of keep those in two separate categories in my mind. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then also
here is
like what you read before, like whatever you read before. I know sometimes if I've read too many of the similar types of novels or, themes or something like that, I'll get to one finally where it's like, oh, I need something in a really different direction. And usually I could tell within a few pages. And I don't consider reading a book for a few pages necessarily bailing. I feel like I need to get like X amount in before I'm considering like DNFing it.
It's just heavy petting at that point, Chris.
Well, not for you. You're like, you said you bailed on the first page.
Yeah, he bails on hello.
It was so awful by the end of the page one is that I am not continuing.
You're like the guy you show up for the date. You don't even go into the restaurant. You're just like turning around and like, it's like, hopefully it's a revolving door in there because you're just like, you're out. No, not.
I'm not blushing because you're hitting my tender spot here, but I resemble that remark. Here is the sentence that made me bail, and it was on about page 6. I won't embarrass the author by telling you who it is. That last phrase was memorable. A slow, billowing premonition, an unease that came down with such heft that I became flatulent most of the time.
Like, I'm Googling that. That's it.
That's amazing. That goes back to Chris's point about the editors, I feel like. something happened there and someone dropped the ball in terms of taking responsibility for dealing with it.
Oh gosh.
I do not think that word means what you think it means.
No.
Oh boy.
God.
We're talking about people not using words that they know what they mean. I did have one book, for example, that I bailed on several times, not because I wasn't enjoying it, but just because of technical issues of the book. It's a classic, In a Glass Darkly by Sheridan and Fanu. And I tried to read it. It took my third time to read it because the first time I bought it, it was a Wordsworth, those cheap and cheerful Wordsworth editions.
Yeah.
And it was so full of scanning errors that it was just literally unreadable, words that had been transliterated the wrong way. So I abandoned that. And then later on I thought, I want to read that. I bought a second copy. And this was an Oxford Classics version. So I thought I'll probably be safe with that. But it had a binding problem. So it had the middle 80 pages a repeat of the first 80 pages. So I had to abandon it again. So it took me 3 tries to read it just because I needed a copy that wasn't completely, wrecked by the publishing process. And I suspect as editors get cut and, it really commissioning editors will survive, but the actual line by line sub-editing that books need, there are going to be just more and more books that might be intrinsically good, but are just rendered unreadable by carelessness on the publishing side of things.
And I think I saw your Amazon 1-star review where you were like, this book arrived damaged and has 80 pages repeated. 0 stars, right? That almost makes me crazy when you see these people like 5 out of 5 stars, packaged very nicely.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not how any of that works.
Yeah.
Is there anything about your approach to bailing or not bailing that you would like to change in any way?
Yes.
Dorian.
And here is where Sean can be a great inspiration to me, I think. I do not bail with authority. I do not bail with confidence. I set the book down and pick up that more enticing book on the pile and kind of just get going with that. But I haven't abandoned that other book. I'm still reading that book. I just, now I'm currently reading this one, but I'm still reading that other one. And then I'm not reading it for longer and longer. And then eventually it just meekly gets shelved or gotten rid of or something. You know what I mean? Like I have a hard time just being like, done.
Yeah.
Definitive and dramatic.
Yeah, I bail behind the book's back. You're right, Dorian. That is my approach to it.
Wow, you just ghost the book, right?
Yeah.
I'm ghosting the book. It's not cool. I should be more like Sean in everything, but in this especially, where I just imagine you, Sean, as like with a sneer, wiping the bonbons off your bed sheets and the wrappers and stuff, and just tossing that sucker off, done with you. So I think I need more of that.
I'm wondering if I'm going to have to edit out tossing that sucker off, but I'll try that. For me, it's a feeling that actually I feel it in my body, and it's like my gorge is rising. And then when I get to that feeling, I know that I have to bail. Yeah, so it's very visceral.
Actually, I can understand the physical side because, for me, usually when I bail, I've been reading the book and I'll put it down because, some annoying, life thing is happening. And it's when I go back to pick it up again, that's when I suddenly realize, oh, fuck this, this thing again. It's the idea of going back is when then that's when I realize this is not working for me. It's not often during the process of reading itself. It's more, it needs a little bit of time to fester. And you realize this is just, this is not happening.
Yeah, and that really cuts into your reading too when you have a book like that, when you don't want to get back
does,
to
'cause
it. And that's just a
slow
sad
down.
thing.
You slow down when you're reading a bad book.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Talking about the opposite side of the coin, people that will never fail, that will always finish what they start. The most extreme version, and she doesn't watch my channel, so I can tell you this without naming her. A dear friend of mine, her Goodreads is full of books that she hasn't picked up in years, but she still considers herself to be reading them, and she must finish them, including one that she picked off the shelf and read the first paragraph and realized she grabbed the wrong book off the shelf. But because she'd read the first paragraph, she had to keep reading it. And there are books that have been on her Goodreads for 10 years. And she
Wow.
hasn't
Your
up in
friend is
that
devoted.
long, but she has to finish them.
That seems very unhappy.
Hmm.
I have a
Yes.
question. I don't know, like in terms of that particular person, but my hunch is, any rate, that the people who are super determined that they must finish everything that they read are actually not big readers. Like people who read like a lot. I don't think you just can't. You can't live this way, right? I mean, I guess that's maybe your friend is. I guess I was wondering is your friend an avid reader or just kind of a 5 books a year kind of a person?
She's not as avid of a reader as we four are, but she sets Goodreads goal and so on. But these books that she doesn't really like, her current reads is just constipated with all these books.
Yeah.
I mean, she has bailed on them, whether she's acknowledged this or not.
Yeah.
The bailing has happened, right? I mean,
Really, the Goodreadsing of it is the part of the problem, because once you've committed to it in public, she obviously feels that pressure then. Whereas if she wasn't doing it in a way that other people could see, she could probably just chuck them. But
Interesting. Yeah.
Are there any books that you have finished that you wish you had bailed on in retrospect?
No, I've finished a book before.
Oh yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I was actually on an airplane and my wife Flora is like grunting and grunt. She's like, "Why are you?" I was like, "Because it's like I'm pissed, I need to finish this so I could really write a review." And oh God, it was so annoying. But usually I'm just happy to set down a book and walk away from it if I'm going to bail on it. I mean, not that I've always had confidence about bailing, and sometimes I'm still a little leery of, is it just the mood I'm in? Should I wait a little bit? So I'll sometimes wait a little bit and pick up something else. And I think like reading multiple books, having a few books going can sometimes help with that. Because I am a big mood reader. So if something's not, then I'll put it down. But I usually don't let it go for longer than a week, and I'll just finally say I'm going to give up on that one. So, but I can't recall finishing one that I regret finishing that I thought about bailing.
I can definitely.
What's yours?
I mean, it tends to be, there's the hate reading, Chris, totally agree. Although I get a little bit of like, perverse pleasure from that. So I don't know if regret really quite fits in there, that happens a lot with me with certain kinds of Holocaust books, which I, read sort of with professional interest, and many of them, sort of the more recent ones, are often extremely like terrible and infuriating and like I think ethically wrong and stuff like that. So, but that's sort of a little different. But I'm thinking of like a couple of thrillers in particular where I just feel super manipulated. Like I got sucked into there's something really compelling about the premise or whatever, but then the writer will do something kind of just really lazy or sketchy or I don't know, but like, and so I get mad afterwards because I had to finish to find out, what happened at the end, right? But the detective's daughter has been kidnapped by the psycho, and it's like a super lazy kind of like move or whatever. I'm like, I hate this, but I'm like, I have to find out make sure she's okay, so I regret those.
Yeah, I'd be similar. For me, the genre is science fiction, because I'll often read a book because the premise, the idea is interesting, the idea is captivating, but then you you're reading it and it's starting to fall apart, but I will persist because the central idea is so good that I want to see how it pays off. And then you get to the end and you think to yourself that this was definitely not worth the ride, but you can't completely tell that you've done a bad thing until you've actually read the whole book. But then I get angry, very angry.
I think I'm much more likely to bail on literary fiction than on genre fiction, actually.
Why is that?
Yeah. Lots of times I think genre fiction is more honest. I mean, literary fiction is a genre too. It's not my favorite genre, I guess I might say. Overwriting bothers me. I feel like there's often a lot of that in literary fiction. But I guess the last thing I'll say about it is that I think with other kinds of genres, I feel like reading an individual instance of it, like part of the pleasure is the way it fits into the bigger landscape of whether it's science fiction or like, police procedurals or what have you, you know what I mean? And so I can find an interest in that, even if, this crime wasn't that good, but I've never read that kind of a detective before or something like that, and I might find that interesting. There's a certain subculture or something that the book investigates. I'm like, well, that was neat, even though this mystery was like pretty lame. I don't find those kinds of satisfactions in literary fiction as much.
Well, when the style is so important, and if the style isn't working for you, then that is very hard to get past.
I'm glad to know that there wasn't so much separating us in our approach to bailing. I think, a bit more trigger happy in the bailing department, but we're all discriminating in our own way. And in addition, we know that James is not averse to DNFing, but he is very averse to DNSFing. Do not say fuck. I think she said it about 17 times during this chat.
Well, I apologize.
You get a little rating, you get an explicit warning on your thing channel.
I don't care about it at all.
Kids like you more. It's all good. It's all good.
In my defense, this is like 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I'm not normally even awake at this point, so I'm stringing words together is the prize here.
That is a great favor by being conscious.
Yes.
Absolutely. So thanks everybody for your thoughts.
Thanks for having us, Sean. You were an inspiration in the bailing.
That's right. Although not in your taste in Tove Jansson. I'm sorry, you just man.
No.
Well, maybe I'll try her again. Jesus.
Yes, please do.
I